Blessed is the man who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. But the man who delights in the law of the Lord and meditates on his law day and night, he is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yield its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers.
Last week we started a series, it's called Rooted. If you remember, I gave you a gladioli bulb to plant, and I hope you took it home and planted. For those of you that weren't not here last week, I still have some in my office, and I'll bring them out, and I'll have them out in there as soon as I get done at the end of the service. So a lot of times, I have people play pranks on me and stuff. And so there are times that you kind of get even and stuff. And so I've got a couple of people really afraid because they posted something on Facebook and if they could get a couple of likes. And so at the end of the service, we're going to have a teachable moment. Okay. Because Linda had actually had taken my ice cream sandwiches that I had in the back that I like to snack on, and she was looking out for me, so she actually took them and duct taped them for me. And so then she thought she was really in trouble, so she went back and she unduct taped them and then thought, well, now we're even, right? And I said, oh, no. So Monday, while everybody was in here for the auction, Linda was in the back and everything, and so Mark, who is my co-partner in crime, kind of kept her busy for a little while, and I decided that since she wrapped up my ice cream sandwiches, she had a brand new car. And so it's only deserving that if you have a brand new car, which is a present, it should get wrapped. So have you ever seen a car wrapped, saran wrap? So I had to do it a little bit. But I went in and told her that I did it and for her to come out and see it because I didn't want, her paint job to get kind of messed up or anything. So anyway, her paint job is fine. Everything's cool. We're done with that trick. Okay. But I say that to say this because we're going to talk about growing this morning. And I knew that I probably could not get these two individuals to get up here and talk to you about this, and so I would just like to kind of share. About 6 to 7 years ago, this month, August, as a matter of fact, I think it is about 7 years ago this month, maybe, we actually had a carnival that we always had every summer until my friend went to Florida. And like always, in all of the carnivals, I generally will walk around meeting and greeting people and stuff. And this carnival was kind of a little bit different because there was a lady that was sitting out underneath a tree all by herself. And she wanted to stay underneath that tree all by herself. She had brought her two little girls to come and be part of that carnival. And so, unbeknownst to her, she did not know me from Adam. And every once in a while, she kind of regrets the day that she let me talk to her because we began a conversation. And You know, sometimes when you look, a lot of times people look at some things and they talk about, you know, I'm really not this person or that person. I can't do this or I can't do that. But yet, if you were to take Linda from 7 years ago or 6 years ago to the Linda that is today, you will find that there's a total difference in her. The amount of people that she has shared her testimony with, and she doesn't share her testimony a lot of times in words. She shares her testimony in her actions and just the way she treats people. She is one of those that would give you the shirt off her back, you know, and she would do that. And sometimes when you have conversations with people, sometimes people don't think they're growing because they don't see it, because they're too close to the situation. But when they step away, other people begin to see those things. And the same thing is with Megan. Megan came here about 4 years ago, I believe, right? She was brought here by a guy by the name of Kevin Mahone. Her and Dee Dee, I believe it was, right? And after that, I think you came. Did you come the same time, Aaron? Did you come before them? Okay. So Kevin had brought Aaron and also brought Megan and them and stuff, you know. And every once in a while, we'll still get in touch with Kevin and say, "Hey, how you doing? Hey, Pastor, I'm doing well, but you know, he really needs to get into church, and he knows that, but he struggles. He really does." But Megan is another one. If you were ask her, I think she would tell you she's an introvert. But yet, if you get around her at where she works, you would never know it. She's always sharing with the people that she works with. And not only just the people who she works with, she will also share with the people that come in there. As a matter of fact, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, during all this coronavirus and stuff, there was a baseball team that was coming in to play a baseball tournament, I believe. And they were looking for a church. And she said, "Well, if you want to go 20 minutes, I've got one that you could go to." Now, they didn't come, and that's okay. But yet, she told them about that. And sometimes what we fail to realize is, what is it that God's asking us to do to grow? Okay? And today we're going to talk about that, because there are some things that we have a misconception about in what I need to grow in my Christian walk. Because so many times we've got the formula backwards. And today we want to get the formula straight. And so the teachable moment will come at the end of the service, and they are so nervous, okay? And I've told them, don't worry, I'm the one getting wet, okay? And if some people have problems with it, that's cool, but we don't. So anyway, last week we talked about rooted. And so I kind of did this on purpose, because these are pepper plants that I planted, and I fertilized and I watered. And so last week what I did was I deliberately left them here. So they have had no sunshine, no attention, no water at all. And if I was to show you, the leaves are starting to come off and wilt. Okay, now it doesn't really matter because I still haven't found a blossom on them. Okay, so I'm not going to get any peppers. It's just going to be a nice green plant. Something ate all the blossoms off of it when they started coming out. So it's really weird. So anyway, because if you look down here, they ate off some of the other stuff. So in the beginning, you planted these. If I could take and actually make this a clear container, what you would see underneath this soil and the dirt that's in here, it's a real black, fertile soil that I have in here. What you'll find is every one of the roots of these plants, because of the contained space that they are in, they have already started growing together. And if I was to try to pull out one of the plants without breaking the roots of any of the other three, I would find it very difficult for that to happen. Because they've all been contained in this one little area, this one little space, and they've learned that I've got my roots and my roots are growing, and they're all searching for the same water, the same nutrients and everything, and they're intertwined among themselves. And so I have to leave them alone now until everything's over, because if I end up trying to take one out, I run the risk of killing all of them by breaking the roots off of all of them. And so I don't want to do that, so I have to take it back out. And why I want to water it, I have no idea, because it's not going to give me any fruit, but it's kind of cool because they're green, and they look good. But they won't grow very big because they're in a contained area also. They need the freedom to do these things. And so what we want to do this morning is actually talk about some things, because once that seed is planted, what do you expect it to do? If you plant a seed, what do you expect that seed to do? Grow? Everybody agree that when you plant a seed, you expect that seed to grow, right? So what ends up happening is we expect it to grow, and so ultimately, we want that seed to grow and bear tons of fruit, right? Or vegetables, or whatever it is that seed is that we're planting. We expect it. It's like planting a tomato plant and sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and you never get a tomato plant out of it. It becomes a very big disappointment. I mean, you've already got the taste in your mouth that you got for that fried bologna sandwich with that tomato. And I mean, it's just like, tomato, would you hurry up and grow? Because I just can't wait, because I know that the taste that's going to be there is just going to be so delicious. Or a watermelon. If you like watermelon or cantaloupe or green beans or squash or gourds or whatever, zucchini, whatever you're growing, you've planted those seeds expecting, except for broccoli. There is a sign in my garden that says no broccoli allowed. Or no Brussels sprouts, Any type of vegetable that starts with a B, besides, and beans don't start with B. We have disclaimers. But anyway, what ends up happening is, if you plant that seed. Now, we talked about last week the parable of the sower, okay? The seed growing among the weeds, on the rocks, and all of that stuff. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you put that seed in fertile ground. If you really want something, you're going to have to do some work, okay? You're going to have to do some work, but you're going to have to take that seed and put it in fertile ground. So this morning, let's talk about some of the agents of growth, because the problem is, in our spiritual life, ladies and gentlemen, we have got some things backwards as to how we grow as a Christian. And today what I want to do is I want to burst your bubble and share with you there's something you need to do, yes, but it's not what you think. Go with me, if you would, to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 5 through 9. And look at what Paul begins to say to us all. He begins to start asking a question. Because when you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3, you'll find that Paul was dealing with some very immature Christians. Man, they were arguing about everything. And Paul is trying to settle some disagreements that they were having. And here's one of the major disagreements that they were having. Here's what he said. It's starting in verse number 5, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, he says this, "What then is Apollos? What is Paul?" Because they're talking about who's the greater teacher. You know, I'm a follower of Paul. I'm a follower of Apollos. So my teaching is better than your teaching. I learned better from this person than that person. So that makes me more learned than you. And they're arguing about this. And Paul writes, he says, hold on, what then is Apollos? And what is Paul? Listen, they are servants through whom you believed, and each has the role the Lord has given. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are God's co-workers. You are God's field, God's building. You are God's building and his field. So one of the things that we fail to realize is what he is saying is this, ladies and gentlemen. God is the one who makes the seed to grow. God is. And we want to talk about some of these things because you need to understand something. The seed matters. If you just take that seed and throw it on top of the ground, it's probably not going to do anything. It may not rain for a while. Therefore, it may dry up. The wind may come and blow it away. But if you take that seed and plant it in the ground, and you think about it, almost every seed plant that you get, if you go out there, it will give you instructions or directions that says, you need to plant this seed 9 inches below the ground. You need to plant this seed 3 inches below the ground. And they'll give you instructions. They'll also tell you what kind of soil that basically it will grow in. They'll also tell you whether that seed does good in sun or in shade. There are those directions. It'll also, hopefully you know, that you can plant a seed out in the field, and let me say this, you are totally dependent upon God for the rain, unless you've got an irrigation system set up. And so what we need to understand is this. Your spiritual growth and my spiritual growth, ladies and gentlemen, it is not in my hands or your hands. So don't think I'm crazy yet. Just listen to what I have to say. Because when you begin to look here in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, you begin to see they are arguing. They are quarreling about their faith. And Paul comes along and says, hold on, don't you understand something? I planted, Apollos came along and watered, but neither one of us are the ones that helped you to grow. Was God gave the increase. It wasn't me. It wasn't him. It was God. God was the one that was doing it. And what happens is this. He began to start addressing all of these things through the first letters, or the letters that he wrote to the church. 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians is helping them to get past their disagreements, their quarrels and everything, and trying to help them to get stronger, to understand what it was that was going on. And what they were saying was, which one of these people should we follow? And you'll hear it a lot of times, ladies and gentlemen. And let me say this. I am so glad you all come. I really am. And I hope and pray that you learn from my teaching. Because it isn't my teaching, it's God's teaching. I can only give you the words. God is the one that's going to make it grow. And there's some things that's going to be dependent upon you. This is where a lot of times you'll hear people say, I'm not going to that church anymore because I'm not getting anything out of the services and I'm not growing. And they blame their growth on the church. They'll blame their growth on the preacher. The preacher isn't the growth. The church isn't the growth. They will provide a mechanism, but the growth is dependent upon the people, the vessels, as to whether they retain it or not. That's why a lot of pastors have different ways of teaching, because we all learn different ways. There are times people will learn by reading something over and over and over again. Others, most people, won't learn it by reading it. Most people will learn by watching it. 7 times, and then they get it. So, this sermon goes up on Facebook, you got 6 more times. During the week, you can watch it every day, and then by next Sunday, you'll have gotten what it was that I was trying to say to you today, and growing. So what happens? Paul says, listen, that we, in you, we are only merely servants of God. That's who we are. We are his servants. When we're trying to help other people and stuff, we're his servants, okay? We're serving. And that's what God is asking us to do. And what happens is this, Paul was saying, listen, y'all need to stop your fighting, because spiritual growth is not part of a human's work. Spiritual growth is a part of God's work. That's why it's spiritual. We're providing a mechanism, but God's the one that's using the mechanism to help the growth. We become a servant, a worker, to get the stuff out. He's the one that's helping to grow. Paul was trying to say, listen, you guys need to understand something. You're trying to focus on whose life is better than this one and all of these things, failing to realize that God is trying to grow each of you separately. He's not making every one of you a bean plant or a tomato plant. If all we ever grew, ladies and gentlemen, were tomatoes, we would get sick of tomatoes. If all we ever grew were money trees, we would get tired of money. Because you can't eat it. And you couldn't spend it, because what are you going to spend it on? There is nothing, you can't make anything if that's all you're growing. You have to have a variety. And so what God is doing is making each one of us a different variety of a plant. We're all being planted and he's growing us. We are his creation. And we are not the same. So many times what we say is, I really wish I could be like this person. And God's saying, I don't want you to be like that person. I got that person working and doing something over here. I need you to do something over here, so I need to make you different. You cannot have in your car, well, maybe you could. What couldn't you have? How many of you are left-handed? Have you ever tried to use a regular hammer?
Regular pair of scissors.
And a regular pair of scissors? How hard is it? It sure can it? So I think they have a left-handed hammer now. And I know they have left-handed scissors. Okay, me, I just turn them upside down, but that doesn't work either. Because they're meant to work in a certain fashion. But we need to understand what it is that Paul is trying to say to us. And that is this, that all of us have a place, but ultimately God is the growth. It's on him. But please understand that God wants us all to grow. So there's some things that we need to understand. And what does it say? In verses 7 through 9, he makes it very plain. Look at what he says. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are what? They're one. And each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. But look at what he says. For we are God's co-workers. You are God's what? Field. You are his field or his building. So we need to understand that we are God's field. Okay? So if you understand, how do I need to do this? So one of the things of being in God's field is what you are doing right now. Remember he says, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of such is, and much more so as you see the day approaching. One of the ways to immerse ourselves in God's field is to get together as the body of Christ and feed off of one another. Okay? We're getting nutrients. This is his field. We're all being planted. Another part of it, why do we always talk about a Bible study? A lot of times we say, okay, I really want someone to lead the Bible study for me. That's awesome. Let them lead it for you. But let me say this to you. Anybody can lead a Bible study. Okay? The problem is people say, I'm not qualified to lead a Bible study. How can I teach someone? It's not your job. It's to teach them the things that you have learned. Okay? Or to make them grow. So what you do is whatever it is that's in there, in the book, the writing, the whatever else, you give it to them. It is not your job to make them grow. You can't force someone to learn. We try it in school all of the time with our kids. We take 30 kids and put them all in a room, and we have one person up there trying to teach them something, and each one of them may have a different way of grasping the knowledge. And so what happens? They have to take that knowledge that teacher has and bring it down into how they understand it. And so what happens a lot of times is this. A kid's doing bad in school. And so what happens? It's the teacher's fault. Someone's not growing in the church. It's the preacher's fault. It's the church's fault. No, it's our fault. Because somehow we've got to break that down into how we learn. And this is what God is trying to say to us. If you will provide to me, for me, that ground, and let me plant the seed in there, I will show you how to grow. I will water that plant. Have you ever been in the middle of a Bible study or just reading your Bible in the morning? And you say, okay, I'm going to read, these verses, and you never get to them. Because all of a sudden, you start reading, and then all of a sudden a thought comes in there. And the next thing you know, you're so engrossed in that thought that's coming through there and everything that's happening, the next thing you know, you've been there for an hour. And you just thought it was only a couple of minutes. And you get up from there and you think, what did happen? Where did that come from? All I'm doing is reading. And God's watering. And God's fertilizing. He's helping that seed to grow more and more. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and maybe the conversation turns around to salvation and you think there is no way that I can ever tell anybody the plan of salvation. There is no way that I can ever lead anyone to Jesus. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, you're just talking to them, and the next thing they keep asking you questions, and you're sitting there thinking, I don't know the answer to this, but yet something just spews out. And at the end of the day, you're thinking, why didn't I record that? That was a good lesson. I should have known that. And then you try to use the same lesson on the next person. And it didn't work. Because why? You're trying to use you instead of God. And what God is saying is, listen, I'm the one that's planting the seed. I'm the one that's watering the seed. I'm the one that's causing the seed to grow, not you. You need to just give me the vessel. You be the vessel in which I can plant my seed in there. Not someone else's seed, my seed. And I'll give you the necessary nutrients to help you grow. Because let me say this to you. In God's field, ladies and gentlemen, growth is not an option. God does not plant seeds to die. God plants seeds to grow. God plants seeds to blossom. God plants seeds to increase. So many times we're sitting around and we start these pity parties about, well, I'm not really growing, I'm not really seeing this. Hey, God didn't plant that seed in there for you to have a pity party with. God planted that seed in there so that what? He gets the glory, not me. He's planted the seed because he's expecting an increase to continue to grow. There are so many times that, wow, if I was to even start, I couldn't, couldn't even imagine. Because, for instance, I've been with a lot of you for a long time. So if I could sit down and say, okay, how many did God use me as an agent to baptize? Some, he used me as an agent to baptize 30 years ago, Tammy? It's been a while. And then, did I baptize you and Carol? And that's been 30 years ago, And then, I don't know. I think Linda's the last one I baptized maybe this year. Not sure. Oh, Megan. Yeah, Megan too. They love water. I should have done that. But honestly, when you look back sometimes you think, okay, and you watch people, you watch their life and you watch their growth, and you think, God, thank you so much. I didn't baptize Jim and Tracy, and that's why they're on the back seat. But so many times what we fail to realize is this. God not only gives us, the growth is not an option, but God also helps us to understand that in our growth, we need the right environment. As a Christian, you can't grow by yourself. You need that environment. You ever seen a tree planted out in the middle of the field all by itself? Every once in a while, but it looks so barren because there's other things that need to occur and other things that need to happen. So many times what ends up happening is if that tree is out in the middle of the field all by itself, it has no shelter, no protection from the elements. And so many times what happens is with Christians, if we get out by ourselves, we don't have the right environment for growth because the enemy is going to pick us off. It's almost like a thunderstorm's coming and that lightning is looking for some way or something to become a conduit from the heaven to the earth. And sometimes that's the way Satan is in our lives. If we're out there by ourselves, he's looking for a conduit to cause havoc with. And if we're not in the right environment with no protection, we become that conduit that's there. Paul talks about this in the book of Colossians, chapter 2, in verses 5 and 6, or 6 and 7, I'm sorry. Here's what he says. He says, so then, just as you have received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live in him, being rooted and built up in him and established in the faith, just as you were taught, overflowing with gratitude. Overflowing with what? Gratitude. So many times we complain about the lot it seems that we seem to have drawn in our life with God. And what we need to understand is this. If your life is completely immersed in sinful actions and sinful things, it's not going to grow. The environment is not conducive to have the nutrients that you need to feed upon. You need those things, and that's what he's saying. So thank him for the things that you're being taught, because those are the nutrients that he's feeding you. And he's feeding you those nutrients, ladies and gentlemen, through other people. The words and the conversations that people have with you. I keep trying to tell people, if I meet someone somewhere, the conversations that we have are not a coincidence. The words that we say are not a coincidence. When I have a conversation with somebody that I meet, I don't have, hold on a minute, let me see, who are you? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to talk to you today, and here's what I'm supposed to talk to you about. I have no idea, because I don't even know half the time who they are. So how in the world can I have a conversation written down to someone that I don't even know who they are and what their needs are? But God does. And so what does God do? God provides the mechanism that we have, or that we, through us, to be able to, do the things that he wants us to be. And that is this, ladies and gentlemen, we become the divine agents of God, is who we are and what he says. So listen, what he's trying to say is this: you need to continue to live in him. Not in yourself, in him. Put your roots in him. and continue to do these things. We do this by being devoted to His Word. We do this by even, sometimes you get a song put up on the screen. It's a brand new song and you have no idea how it goes. And so what do? I don't know that song. I'm not going to get anything out of this. Do you ever, most songs that are out there, I have no clue. I've never heard them before. Okay? But here's what I don't ever do. If I ever hear a song, I start singing along with it. And can I tell you something? Almost every song out there you can sing. The tunes a lot of times are almost the same. And if they aren't, make them up. Because who cares? I'm not singing to you, I'm singing to Him. You know, He don't care if I'm singing the wrong tune. He don't even care if I'm singing off key. He's just saying, hey, dude, I like your attitude. I like the way that you're smiling. I like the way that you express the expression of the words. I like the way that you're being filled with the words and letting the words speak to you. I like the way that you're allowing the agent who wrote the song, who's singing the song, who's doing the music. I like the way that you're allowing them to come in and use all of that to help you to grow. Because why? In worship, it isn't about me and it ain't about you. So who stinking cares if your next door neighbor who's singing says, I wish you'd shut up, you got me off tune. That's okay. The only reason I'm off tune is because you were and I was following you. You know, they'll move. But if they don't, who cares? Become a duet or a trio, you know? And everybody, and God loves it. So many times we need to understand, we need to look at the environment that we're presenting God with. Is it an environment to grow? Is it a conducive one? And in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, sometimes you are going to experience adversity. I'm going to tell you that right now. I have a very difficult time, as I've shared with you multitudes of times, I have a very difficult time with a preacher who tells someone, come to Jesus and your life will be fine. And I'm saying, I don't know what Jesus you're serving, but the one that I'm serving, everything's not fine. Because Paul said this, I counted a privilege to suffer with Jesus. And here's what the book of James says. Consider it what? Remember that. My brothers and sisters. Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, when your bank account all of a sudden says you have $10 million. Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, when all of a sudden life is going great and wonderful. And you've got anything and everything that you've ever wanted. Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, when every time you pray to God, you get exactly what you wanted and 10 times more. That's not what he says. He says, consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. Whenever. Sometimes I think he should rewrite that and say, consider it a great joy when you don't have it. Or consider it a joy. But he says, consider it a great joy whenever you face or experience various trials. What do? Whenever we start experiencing great trials, what do? Very first thing, what do? A lot of times before we start praying, we do something else. Why me, Lord? Okay, what did I do wrong? Can I say this to you? Have you ever considered you didn't do anything wrong? You did everything right. You gave your life to Christ. And so, a lot of times, I would get so upset coming to church on Sunday morning. Honest. There were times I would wake up in the morning and I dreaded going to church on Sunday morning. Because I knew as soon as I got there, I was going to meet somebody who was going to start complaining about something. I think I shared with you, it was downstairs in the basement. That's where the Sunday school rooms were. And so I thought there was only one way up to the top floor, and that way was by the front door to go into the sanctuary. Every Sunday morning, there would be these people who didn't come to Sunday school. They only came to church. And they would be lined up because they knew when Sunday school was over. So they would get there early for church, late for Sunday school, but they would be taking a number. And it was like you walking up and the first step would have number 1. Pastor, you want to know what happened to me this week? Later. We can talk. No, we need to talk now. You need to hear what happened to me this week. You need to happen to me this week, me this week, me this week, me this week. And it's like, well, you want to know what happened to me? You know, and you're sitting there and you're being bombarded. Before you even get into the pulpit or even get there to sing, I mean, you couldn't even go in. By the time you hit the door going into the sanctuary, you want to go home. Why in the world do I even want to be here, Lord? All I get is complaints, grumbles, murmurs, all this stuff. And then finally I found there was a back way to get up to the pulpit, that I didn't have to run the gauntlet. And then if they wanted to complain, they had to hold up the line of the people that were wanting to get out of the church. And so it was wonderful because they were behind them, pushing them out. But he says, but now I'm ready. I know that if I get here on Sunday morning, Satan's going to probably try to do something. Cool. Go for it. I got it. Because I know who I serve. And I know that I'm going to experience various trials. So what's he say? Count it a joy. So somebody tells me something else, I say, that's awesome. Are you nuts? No, I'm not nuts. Jesus said I should be joyful about that. And that's what he says. Okay? He says that there's going to be these things. So we need to understand something. And that is this. Quit complaining when things happen. Look at it as, where is the opportunity to grow here? Where is it? I played baseball when I was a kid. And there were times that I'd strike out. And there were times when I would get on base and try and steal a base and I'd get thrown out. And maybe you try and steal again and you get thrown out. And then you had to start watching. Okay, what's the move of the pitcher? How quick can he get the ball to the plate? How far can I get off the base that he can't throw over there quick enough that I can get safely back? So you start learning. The more times you strike out, You begin to learn what the pitches that they're throwing you, things you need to start looking for. When you get thrown out trying to steal a base, you start looking and picking, because they all have the same way all of the time. And so you start looking for that. And then you read that. And so guess what? The adversity of striking out and stealing and getting caught help for a place of growth. And there are times we need to understand that when there is the adversity and there is failures, those should not stop us from growing. Those should help us to grow. But so many times what happens is we fail and we stop. We just stop. And God says, no. I've planted you into the best soil there is. I am giving you the best food there is to grow. I am giving you the best to do all of these things. So why is it that you're complaining? He says, no. That seed's going to grow. And that seed's going to prosper. Because the things that I plant, I intend to use in my plan. And may I say this to you all. If you're a part of God's plan, ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolutely perfect plan. No flaws. We become the chink in the armor, not him. And we need to begin to understand those things. And some of you are looking right now at your life and you're saying, you know, Pastor Chuck, if I was to look at my life right now, I would say to you, I'm not satisfied where I'm at. And you may think that it's kind of been a waste. But can I say something to you? Maybe you need to look at it different. And that is this. Maybe I'm not where I need to be, but I want to thank, by the grace of God, I'm not where I was. I may not be as far along as I want to be, but God, I just want to thank you I'm not back there. Because it's only by your grace that I've made it this far. And God, it's only by your grace that I'm going to make it the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And so many times, instead of complaining, what we need to do is be thankful. I was sharing last week of a young lady, 26 years old, 2 sons, partying with everybody on Friday night. They were her friends, she thought. But yet evidently when she OD'd, they all left her there with her 2 sons. The one 6-year-old little boy found his mother dead the next morning and thought she was just sick. Now this 6-year-old and this 9-year-old little boy has a father that's in prison, a mother that is dead, and now what do they have to live for? It's just unreal. Maybe you, if you think about it, maybe that could have been you laying there OD'd. Or you read of a car accident where the whole family's killed. And as you're reading the report of the car accident, you realize, I just came through that intersection 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before. Or I go through that intersection all the time. Or somebody got shot here, or somebody got shot there. And maybe because prior, you could have been in that area. But now it's by the grace of God, you're not in that area. You're at another place. And that's why we say, God, I'm not there yet. But by the grace of God, I'm not there, staying. And God, I just want to continue to give this as a vessel to grow. Father, whatever you need to do to help this to grow, help it to grow. And next week, we're going to talk about pruning. Because there are sometimes when you plant things, there are sometimes you need to prune some of the things away from it to make it grow healthier. So last week, you got planted. This week, you're being fertilized and watered. And next week, we're going to talk about pruning. Some of the things that in your life that maybe need to be cut away in order to be healthy. You know, it's like I did for a while when my sugar was 599. When I went to the doctor, it was like, okay, I can't continue to exist on Coca-Cola and Reese cups all day long. You got to cut down and start eating healthy and do things. And so with meds, I can continue to eat some of those things, but at some point in time, you feel the wear and tear on your body also, and you understand that. And there are sometimes each and every one of us would look back at our lives when we get 30, like me, that you look back on the last 30 years and think, if I'd only taken better care of myself here, or if I'd taken better care of myself there, or whatever, if I'd only. But the good thing is, okay, I didn't here, but there's some things I can change to make it different now. And it's only by the grace of God that I've got the opportunity to do that. You're only granted this moment, not another. It's today. Now make the change. Don't wait. As I get a song of an invitation, I ask you to consider, what is it, God, that you want me to do? What is it, God, that you want me to say? You know, maybe it's just right there in your seat. You just need to have a conversation with him and say, Lord, I gave you this vessel. You've planted the seed, Lord. Now help me to get out of the way and let it grow. Because it's only by your grace that I'm living today. Let's stand, would you?
I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. 'Cause Jesus paid it all, and all to him I owe. And 'Cause sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Now, Lord, indeed I find thy power and thine alone can change a leopard's spots and melt a heart of stone. 'Cause Jesus paid it all, and all to him I owe. 'Cause sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. And he washed it white as